the courts indicated and decided that that would be funding, but in a negative manner, increased funding in a negative manner, and thus the negative factor. Now that the economy has gotten better, the money be able to come forward. Well, here's the thing: nobody from the legislature went and told the schools, okay, you're not going to get this amount of money. So in doing that, we'll take the heat. We'll tell you where you're going to have to make your cuts, fundings, or whatever. No, they said, you guys do whatever you can do, and God bless you, and hope you do well. Well, now that the funding is available, it's the same thing. The schools should be able to use that money as they see fit at the local level. Local control of the schools is vitally important for the education of the children that are there, and vitally important for our school system.
Leroy?
Well, education is the key to opportunity and is also the foundation of a thriving future economy. In Colorado, we are ranked 43rd in the nation in per pupil funding in K through 12 and ranked 49th in funding for higher education. I believe we need to continue to invest in our students. And as an educator at Public Community College, I see firsthand the challenges students in our classroom are facing. As a first-generation college student myself, I know the opportunities that can come with a higher education, but I also know that not everyone can afford it. I was fortunate that I served in the United States Marine Corps and was afforded the GI Bill, which afforded me the opportunity to go to college. But not everyone should have to serve in the military in order to be able to obtain a higher education. That is why this year I co-sponsored and I prime-sponsored and introduced the College Affordability Act. This bill capped student tuition from 9% to 6%. And I think we can all agree that we don't need to be paying more in interest. That's one of the challenges our college students face, is that after they get out of college, they can't afford their college degree. It also invested $100 million in higher education. $100 million that we're going to find right here helping our institutions. Public Community College, part of the community college system, will receive $13.5 million. The CSUP system, the Colorado CSU system, will receive over $12 million. This is why Presidents Patty Orjavic and Leslie DeMar supported this bill, which became law.
And it's great that we support education, both at the elementary through middle school and high school and all the way up to secondary education and higher ed. There's no doubt about it. But stats have shown over the years, we've increased funding, especially at the lower levels, tremendously. And what do we have to show for it? What do we have to show for it here in Pueblo, Colorado? We have schools, and we have children that go to onto higher ed college. 70% need remedial classes. What's up with that? What's that all about? Maybe the answer is we have a broken system. We have good teachers. We have good students, I believe. And we have good administrators, but maybe we've got a broken system. Maybe we look a little further. Maybe look at a different paradigm. Maybe we got to kind of look outside the box. Maybe we have to look at school choice. School choice.
Okay.
And if
okay, Leroy,
can I just make one quick comment?
You got time?
And as my opponent said, he couldn't afford to go on to higher education, so he went through the Marine Corps, and it's great. God bless him for that, for sure. But you know what? When we talk about school choice, there's a lot of parents that they can't afford. They don't have the money or the means to send their kids to private education. Maybe we need to provide that. Maybe we need to help them out, just like my opponent got help. Maybe we need to provide for our children as well. tax credits, vouchers, however you want to put it, some way. Give our poor, our middle class, the opportunity to send their children and go on to better.
Leroy? Okay. Any other comments on that, Leroy? Okay. You'll handle this question next. The issue of marijuana stores in parts of Pueblo County has been pretty controversial. Do you believe that the legislature needs to take up more marijuana control measures, or do you think that the current laws are adequate?
Well, we have to remember that this was an initiative that was brought forward by the voters. It was passed by a large margin by the voters. But I do believe that we have a responsibility in the General Assembly to ensure that we are protecting our youth, especially our children in school zones. We need to make sure, and that's one of the reasons why this year the General Assembly worked to pass a bill which required that special packaging be placed on edibles. As you know, this is an issue that is really governed at the county commissioner level. The state has now created the framework, and the implementation from the process or the perspective that you're introducing the question is really a county question.
Amendment 64. As being from law enforcement, I just couldn't support that amendment. I've seen the bad that marijuana has done, and people tell us that it's good for medicinal purposes and so on, and with the passage of this amendment, who knows? It may be the best thing since sliced bread. I don't know. But common sense tells me otherwise. My experience as a law enforcement officer tells me otherwise. My discussions with people throughout this district, whether it be in the schools, whether it be in El Pueblo's Boys Ranch, whether it be the drug addiction facilities where they treat folks for a drug addiction, whether talk to employers who are now having trouble finding people to work and do jobs because they can't pass a drug test. And that's just for starters. That tells me this is just, it doesn't have good written on it, let's put it that way. But as far as more legislation, it really astounds me how this was in fact passed and the voters voted for it, because I don't think they had a full knowledge of what the heck they were voting for. You know, right after we just had an amendment with ballot issue where they're going to say, well, you know what, now we got to fund the enforcement part of it. Well, why wasn't that made known to the people at the time that amendment was put forward, that they were going to need to fund something down the way? Yeah, it sounded good. Well, we're going to give it to the schools for education. So, I mean, irony of ironies, we're going to use money from marijuana sales to talk about how not to use marijuana. Makes a lot of sense to me. I don't understand it. So this is definitely something we brought on ourselves as an electorate, and it's going to be a heck of a job getting answers to all these questions.
George, you'll handle the next question first. Do you support spending millions of dollars to improve the railroad tracks across southern Colorado to keep the Amtrak chief route operating? And if so, how can more people be persuaded to use the service?
Amtrak. Southwest Chief. You know, when that first came about, you know, I thought about that. I thought, goodness gracious, you know, there's not a rail line that is not subsidized. I think there may be one up in the Northeast, a heavily traveled one around New York or Boston or something, but all the others are subsidized. And I said to myself, self, is this really a good idea? And then I thought, you know, doggone it, it's not just Pueblo that we're talking about. It's as far as getting behind this whole idea of the chief, we're talking about southern Colorado, we're talking about southeastern Colorado, we're talking about La Junta, we're talking about Trinidad, we're talking about towns that have been kind of pushed a little bit to the side because they're not on a well-traveled highway. They're on Highway 50, and, you know, they're dying on the vine. We know that, and we see that. And to take this line away from them would make no sense. We wouldn't be any better than the people in Denver who we say don't give us any money. We turn around and say, well, you know, we're not going to help you out on this. And I couldn't in good conscience turn my back. And when Representative Garcia, or my opponent over here, sent me a request as if I would voice my support and backing, I did. I sent him an email and I said yes. And I had previous conversations with Rod Slyhoff and Representative Navarro about this particular issue. A couple of about a month before this, I sent Representative Garcia this email. And I outlined a stop in Pueblo. So I want to tell you what, we have to support this. There's no doubt about it. And what I just told you just now is just about the same thing. I stood in front of 34 other senators in the Senate and said exactly the same words. This is vital to Southern Colorado.
Leroy?
Thank you. Well, I believe my opponent might be a little confused in that Senator Larry Crowder was the sponsor, and he was the one who carried it in the Senate. But I will say that you have come full circle from a town hall meeting you held in February 3rd, 2013, in which you said, I don't believe that we should be funding public transportation options. I would be more in favor of a fuel tax credit, or excuse me, a fuel tax. And you had gone on to say that you didn't know if this was feasible. Why were we saving this? Now, it is true that in the end you did vote for it, but let's remember that this is one of the bills that I initiated this session. This bill was not my bill. This was our community's bill. This was, I heard from Bent County, I heard from Otero, I heard from Lamar, I heard from Otero. All these counties had been in the works on this for years. So I won't stand up here and act like I could take the credit for it, because there was a lot of work that went into this way before I got there. I was fortunate enough to be able to carry the bill, but I did interact with you and ask you. And you were hesitant about the approach. You were unsure of the funding. Senator Crowder was the one who said, let's take the bull by the horns. This is important for my district. I will work with you, Representative Garcia, every single part of the way. And he did. He did. So this is an important bill. You saw this morning the editorial from the Pueblo Chieftain, the Tiger grant that we have received. You know, again, a lot of work went into this that I need to be appreciative for the commissioners in different counties, for the elected officials in different states, because this isn't a one-person solution. That's how I work. I work across the aisle. I work for the betterment of this community. I'm not afraid to work with anyone who has a good idea that can benefit our region.
Well, all I can say is that I got to reiterate my timeline as to when I discussed it with Rod Slyhoff and when I discussed it with Representative Navarro, and I was forwarded an email to my opponent telling him that I would support it and I thought it would be a good idea, and outlining the stop and so on. And but you know what? Here's the thing: when an idea first begins, you don't just jump in and say, "Ooh, here we are." You have to point out the difficulties, point out the pitfalls, if you will, because doing less than that would be remiss. And I'm glad my opponent mentioned about other states. Just so happens that at this last meeting we just had, which happened to be the opening whistle stop, I think they put in the newspaper, the opening whistle stop for the